Okay. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting me come and speak. As you saw there, my name is Brian Mariani. I work with Alpha Omega Institute. This one's on. Maybe this needs to turn off. Or do I use this instead? I'm using. Okay, but this one's on too. Should we turn this one off? That might be giving some of that ringing and echoing. I'll stand back while I start here anyways. Yes, my name is Brian Mariani. I'm with Alpha Omega Institute. And here you can see there's a picture of me and my wife and our 3 kids. Actually, we've got another one on the way. Woohoo! And we are missionaries with Alpha Omega Institute. We've been working with them for about 6 years. You probably, some of you may be familiar with David and Mary Jo Nutting and some of the other speakers as well. And I'll give you just kind of a little overview of what we do at AOI and why we do that. We want to help people answer evolutionary challenges, as that's all around us today, as you know, as you see. We want people to see evidences of God's creation, to stand firmly on His Word, and to, most importantly, grow in your relationship and our relationships with the Lord, right? So those are the goals of Alpha Omega Institute. We provide teaching and training and tools, some of them being a family camp or whitewater rafting camps in the summertime. Especially one of my favorites has been the Yellowstone Creation Adventure, which has been a, 4-night tour? Whoops, go back. 4-night tour or so up to Yellowstone, and you actually get a creation science answer or worldview explanation of the things we're seeing there at Yellowstone. So, and it's a great value for the days you're there, and the lodging and food and all that. So definitely check that out if you're interested. We offer tools. We have a couple tables set up back here, many of which you might be familiar with a lot of the resources there, showing that yes, in all this information, all these books, we've got good evidence for God and for the Bible. So you might be familiar with the Answers books. This is a great starter set where you don't have to read the whole book all at once. You can just pick, each chapter as you have questions that are probably going to be covered in these books. Again, we'll be talking about these books tonight, which I'll tell you in a moment. I was actually able to help write for those books and do the research for those books. We also have a really good set on astronomy. I think you guys have had Spike Saris here at Rocky Mountain Creation Fellowship. So I love his stuff, and I do some teaching on astronomy too as one of my favorites that I do as well. But and then all kinds of other things, bugs and the design and complexity of the cell. And this is a good one that covers different topics: biology, geology, astronomy, anthropology, things like that. Here's a good one on history, the patterns of evidence, the Exodus, where it shows how, the history, which most people kind of align themselves with the history of Egypt as kind of being the best historical culture that we have. Well, it looks like if you line it all up correctly, it all fits really well with the Bible. And the Bible is a really good historical book as well. We see here, we've also developed a DVD set, which you might be familiar with, and a VBS curriculum as well. And here we have a Think and Believe newsletter, and I actually have a sign-up sheet. If you don't already have this, pass that around. It's a free Think and Believe newsletter that goes out every 2 months, and keeps you up to date with different topics, different things that come out in the creation science realm. So check that out and keep up with our ministry that way. And another thing, while we're passing things around too, I brought handouts here, as these are some of my favorite references, articles, even though many of them might not even come from our ministry, but some really good resources there on, again, the astronomy, biology, geology, anthropology, and even beyond science as so-called, into ethics and philosophy and things like that, where we have good evidence for God in the Bible, and that's what I like to give people so you can have one of those. I'll tell you a little bit more about our ministry here in just a minute. The newsletter does also have a kids section. We have a website, Facebook. I'm sorry, this is jumping a little bit. Maybe I'm pressing it too hard. Sorry. We have a Facebook and a YouTube channel as well that we're constantly adding to every day, or at least every week. So check those out. This is the book. This is the first book, and again, now there's 2 books. Yeah, just jumping here. Sorry. There's 2 books here that we've actually been able to put together. And I'll give you a little bit of background for myself. I grew up in Illinois, grew up in a good Christian family, good Christian home, and after I got a degree in physics teaching, I was looking for a teaching job, and initially didn't get any offers, which I thought was kind of funny. I thought, okay, God, what do I do for this year? And I came across Jackson Hole Bible College, a 1-year Bible college program up in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So I said, well, okay, this will be my year out of college to add to it with another year of college, right? And so I went up there, had a great time there, and expected to go and start my career. But ended up going there for a second year, and I thought, this is kind of funny, God, why am I going to a 1-year Bible college for 2 years? It's not because I failed the first year either. It was because they started working on this research project, which come to find out it would become a book, and actually 2 books now. The Genius of Ancient Man is the first one, The Secrets of Ancient Man is the second one. So the Genius of Ancient Man is more about the philosophy, about the concepts of, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And then the second one deals more with that, but also with more of the sites that you see around the world, specific sites showing evidences of God's work throughout history and people's ancient man and what they were like back then. So the goals for the book were to show that ancient man was very intelligent. In this day and age, it's funny, we were playing with the kids just last week, I think it was, and we were talking about dinosaurs, and one of the ants started pretending to be a caveman, you know, and we were being cavemen with the dinosaurs and stuff, and it was like, you know, dumb brutes, you know, basically, the cavemen, and it was like, wait a second, we're tainted by the evolutionary perspective, aren't we? And that's just a little thing, but it's so pervasive in this culture that, you know, just that little thing that, oh yeah, dinosaurs associated with cavemen, sure, you know. Well, no, dinosaurs, we have good evidence. You've probably seen many different evidences that we lived alongside dinosaurs for thousands of years, even after the flood. And from the dragon legends in Europe and China, from the pictures and the sculptures and things, you know, it's like we have good evidence that maybe dragons were real and dragons were probably dinosaurs. I think we can reasonably say that. I don't think it's a stretch to say that. So the idea here being is that with this book we wanted to show ancient man was not just a dumb caveman slowly evolving into what we are today, you know, slowly getting more and more intelligent, learning to talk and learning to use fire and all these different things, right? Adam and Eve walked with God in the garden. Man, what would that be like? I love thinking about that and thinking, you know, imagine walking right next to God and, God, can you teach me quantum physics, please? And he could do that for us, and how cool would that be? And unfortunately, Adam and Eve sinned and fell and then had to leave the garden, and the world has never been the same since. But we have that opportunity to live with God forever because of what Jesus did, right? And so that's the exciting thing is we can be there, we can do that. That's the goal. And so with this book, we wanted again, remind ourselves, ancient man was very intelligent back in the past. Adam and Eve walked with God in the garden. Ancient man dispersed from Babel. We're going to see evidences of that, I think, today as well. We wanted to uphold uphold the authority of Scripture, that it is true. It is real, good history, reliable history. And that in history, we want to keep God as the priority. We want to keep pointing back to God. It's His work. It's His plan that's happening throughout the world as we know it, throughout history. And oftentimes we see Satan counterfeits God's creation. We see that in many different aspects where God did it right and has a purpose for gender and for marriage and for all these different things. And we get these ideas and philosophies, and the Bible tells us to be careful of these vain philosophies and speculations and everything else. So, an example as we dive into the genius of ancient man is this is a good example here where you have evidence right here. Follow the red flashing light there. That's what was found right there. It's called the Antikythera Mechanism. It was found at the bottom of the near Greece, in the Mediterranean Sea, near Greece, as part of a shipwreck, and they dated that shipwreck to about the 2nd century BC. And so that's what it looks like there, but when you do scans of it, and you look at it, it's made up of like more than 30 gears, at least 30 gears. Here's a picture of it. Oh, back up. One more. There we go. There's a bigger view of it there. All these gears that are turning, that are all connected, that are all working, and it was used as kind of like an analog computer, a basic, first computer where it's turning, it's mapping, it's got all the dialogue numbers here. To chart where the sun and the moon are in space. And you could chart that, you could figure out what's going on, where they're at, and how to navigate potentially through the seas and things like that, and possibly even come up with other calculations from that. So in the 2nd century BC, that's before Jesus lived, you already had this technology, you already had this intellect, but we still think of them as, well, just kind of, they wore robes and they just were farmers and peasants and whatever. But people, I think, have always been intelligent. And that's just one example. And there's a whole bunch of different sites we could talk about. Some of these we'll briefly hit on. And we're just going to hit on a whole bunch of different things tonight. Again, there's more in those books than what we can cover tonight. But interesting, unique, significant sites, I think. But we also want to make sure we heed this warning. I want to add this warning right away here, that we want to be prepared to think. We want to be prepared to look at this information and don't just take it from what I'm saying, don't just take it from what a secular scientist is saying or whatever scientist. We always want to do the research, we always want to kind of be careful, we want to be prepared to think, because we know with science even, or history and archaeology, it's based on interpretation. Right? Interpretations of the artifacts and the evidence. In fact, an example comes from the Cahokia Mounds, actually a researcher who worked at the Cahokia Mounds. This actually comes from the National Geographic magazine, which is very devoted to evolution and an atheistic worldview. This is a researcher, Bill Isaminger, I'm not sure if I said that right, an archaeologist who's worked at Cahokia Mounds for 40 years. You put 3 archaeologists in a room together, and you get 5 opinions. On the same data, 3 archaeologists with 5 opinions coming out of it, on the same data, the same evidence, same artifacts. How is that possible? That shouldn't be the case, right? That's what science should be, is you have the data, you collect it all, you crunch the numbers, and you say, this is what happened. But it's not that easy, especially when you're looking at past events and you have to make assumptions. And so, are you making good assumptions or not good assumptions, bad assumptions? It's about opinions, isn't it? It's about, there are differing worldviews on this, right? And differing timelines. And we're going to look at the timelines just to kind of put ourselves in perspective, put this in perspective and kind of understand it a little better. The naturalistic or evolutionary timeline kind of goes like this. You're probably familiar. 13.7 years ago, there was a big bang. There was nothing, it became everything. How that happened, I don't know, but that's for them to figure out. Notice, with 13 billion years, that's a long time, billions of years, they have a lot they have to try to explain, don't they? A lot of, you might call them stories, but at least assumptions and guesses, hypotheses that you have to make for billions of years of time. But throughout that history, if that happened, which I doubt, but 4.5 billion years ago, the sun first formed. Shortly after that, the earth did as well, and evolution after that. Around 4 billion years ago, evolution started. And it wasn't until 195,000 years ago that humans, the Homo sapiens species, really came about, according to them. Now, I don't believe these numbers, remember. But according to them, that's when humans supposedly evolved from our pre-human forms. And then it wasn't until about 12 or 14,000 years ago from now that we started clustering into cities, into places where we were starting to farm and be able to split up the job roles and different things there. Before that, we were hunter-gatherers, right? And then it wasn't until only a few thousand years ago that writing developed, just started, right? Kind of all over the place. In a very quick amount of time, everybody started writing, which we're going to see that as well soon here. But notice, and here's today, you know, I mean, each of these is barely a blink on this timeline because it's billions of years of time. We're trying to put this in perspective. All this has happened fairly quick in their timeline, but it's only recent that we've become intelligent humans. Whereas the Bible, the biblical timeline, very different. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You've maybe seen this number before from Bishop Usher. I don't know if I'd hold to that exact number, but somewhere around 6,000 years ago, 4,000 BC. Here's our timeline. Adam and Eve left or sinned, and they were driven from the Garden of Eden, right? They had to leave. And then you had about 1,700 years of time here. Then you had the global flood, so that's about 4,400 years ago or so. Shortly after that, potentially, there was the Tower of Babel, which we're going to talk about tonight. And many people estimate this is when the Great Pyramids were built, is in the 1400s, or I think some estimate it even further back in time, and some people think maybe Abraham was there at some point while the pyramids were built. I wonder if that's the case myself, anyways. Then you have about 1,000 BC, so 3,000 years ago, David and Goliath would have happened. 2,000 years ago, the cross of Christ. And then here we are today. So it's a very different timeline. That just kind of puts everything into perspective for us. So let's think about what was it like before the flood. Before the flood, Adam and Eve lived, and actually said they lived for 930 years, I think it was, for Adam. That's a long time. Can you imagine? Happy birthday, you know. Okay, imagine living to 120 years. And that would be pretty remarkable in this day and age. It's possible, but it's just rare. 120 years, but imagine, that'd be a lot of candles, right? Think about this too. Isaac Newton lived in the 16 and 1700s, and the father of physics died at a fairly old, 84 years, right? Albert Einstein lived in the 1800s and 1900s here. He continued physics on, and he died at an fairly old, 76. But imagine if they had lived to 120 years, what they could have come up with. Imagine if they had lived 900 years and even overlapped in time where they could have worked together on some of the projects. What could they have done? What could they have learned? And and imagine their birthday cake, living 900 years or so, right? But these people in the Bible, we read in the genealogies here, and we read the histories in Genesis at the very beginning. These peoples, they're fairly intelligent. Noah down here, he built a huge ark It took them 100 years to do it, and I think it was a very good, some of you maybe have been to the Ark Encounter down there in Kentucky. A pretty amazing feat. You know, I think these people weren't as dumb cavemen as we kind of picture them to be, or at least kind of are preconceived to think in those terms. You know, they're musicians, they're doing metallurgy and blacksmithing and things like that. So people were smarter than I think we often give them credit for. And again, you know, if you live 900 years, you know, oh, I'll be a farmer for 30, and then, well, I guess I can be a doctor for the next 80 years. And then, you know, imagine what you could do in 900 years, how many different jobs you could do and you could come up with. But as we see with the flood and with the power of water, this is the Glen Canyon Dam, and all this erosion took place in one of these discharge tubes during a very wet flooding year. Very high reservoir behind the dam, and so a lot of water coming through, and it chewed up all this rock pretty quick. So water can really do a lot of destruction, and so it's hard to say exactly what, you know, was able to be preserved from before the flood, especially when you think of the earth movements, the bending and the warping and the metamorphizing of the rock. I don't know what could be left. You know, there's some speculation there are things out there that are found in coal, that are man-made objects and things like that. And, this is where, again, that warning comes into play, where we need to be careful when we study this topic of archaeology and of the history of people groups, because you notice that timeline. A few thousand years ago, you know, we can be fairly certain that these events took place. In fact, some people actually still question that Jesus actually lived. But I think ultimately you have good evidence Jesus did live and did do what he said he did, say what he said he did. I think we've got good evidence for that, even though people might question it. But the further we go back in time, the more challenging it is to be able to document. The fuzzier it gets, I'll say. The fuzzier it gets, the further back in time you go. And so, you know, a lot of times when you think about this topic of ancient man or of archaeology or of the pyramids and things like that, it's like, yeah, wow, these are pretty amazing feats that they constructed these astronomically aligned pyramids and things like that. And so sometimes today, you get people saying, we weren't that smart back then, it must have been aliens helped us. Have you heard that before? Yeah. The Ancient Aliens TV show and things like that. That's where I want to, again, hearken those warnings of we need to be careful as Christian thinkers in general, but Christians that we don't get sucked into these philosophies and empty deception and things like that that can be kind of confusing and kind of weird, and some of this can tend to be speculative, so we do always want to be doing our homework and being careful with these things. So let's say you do find an object in the ground. We're getting back to this now. You find an object in the ground, how do we date how old that object is? And I'm going to show you, we have dating methods to figure out how old that object is. One of the dating methods, wrong dating method. One of the dating methods we can use is historical type dating methods, where you have chronologies or records that are you actually find writing, or sometimes even coins, that you can, okay, this is, in the year of the third year of the king, and so you can kind of track and figure out, okay, when was this? If this is written in the third year of this king, you can kind of base it on that. So that's one of the best ways of dating artifacts is well, what did they say, and what records do we have? Then there's relative dating methods, which is relative. It's we don't know exactly. It's relative, where one layer is on the bottom, there's other layers on top, so obviously this layer was before the other layers that came after that. And so that's kind of a general relative way of, and that you would call that stratigraphy. So that's a general way of understanding, okay, this is older than that, for sure. We have evidence of pots being kind of evolving to some degree, and although there's still assumptions that play in here, aren't there? If you're seeing that we still assume, well, they didn't make both pots at the same time. I think it's a fairly well documented science of studying pottery, studying pots, but again, there's still some assumptions that come into play as to how those developed. Then you have index fossils, which would be like this. The coelacanth fish has always been thought to be have gone extinct 70 million years ago, because we all of a sudden lose it in fossil records. So 70 million years ago, the coelacanth goes extinct, but then today we've found them living off the coast of Madagascar, and the people are fishing them and eating these coelacanth fish. So actually, how do we know it's 70 million years old? They're dating this rock layer is at least 70 million years old because it's got this fish fossil. But we don't know that for sure. We don't know that for sure. And of course, I don't believe in the numbers here. And that's part of what I was talking about with these timelines, is the further and further we stretch back. You know, they'll give you numbers for, oh, this iron bronze head, you know, is 15,000 years old. That's where, okay, it's based on assumptions, it's based on the worldview, and I think we can close the gap on that, and it's probably not 15,000 years old, but probably came about after the flood. I think that's we can pretty clearly, confidently say it came after the flood, and I think a lot of these things can be determined. You know, you think about the Tower of Babel and people leaving the Tower of Babel, you know, if they're going off into, where are they going to duck into when it gets stormy and wet out? They're going to duck quickly into a cave or something. And if they need some kind of hammer type thing, you know, well, they've got a rock right here, and they can start beating what they need to with the rock. And so I think it's kind of what they needed, or what the necessity that they needed at the time, where they would use rocks. Or then, you know, as they got settled more and more, then they could, you know, okay, now we can do more of our metal working and stuff, and get the other iron points and different things like that, the copper and the bronze and the iron, and that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily a slow progression, slow evolution over thousands of years between the Bronze Age and Iron Age and all that. This is probably people spreading out from the Tower of Babel and using what they had. And imagine you're leaving people, you're probably leaving a lot of the technology you had. Maybe this person takes this piece of information and you go this way. Like if he's good at blacksmithing and you guys aren't as much, well, that's too bad for you, right? And we lost a lot at the Tower of Babel. Anyways, we'll get back to that, I think, too, here. The ginkgo tree was thought to have gone extinct 51 million years ago. But we still have ginkgo trees today, so I don't think that's true. So these are assumptions. You see definitely a lot of assumptions. And then you have a third type of dating an artifact, and that's through these absolute dating methods, which are all these scientific ones. And yes, elements do change from one element to another, so they do radiometrically decay over time, but you have to make a lot of assumptions as to what was there at the beginning, how much movement has changed in the rocks of one element moving to another place. You have a lot of assumptions, really, that you have to make to believe these absolute dating methods. So these are our three dating method types. And yet they all are based on assumptions. Errors can still happen with all of these. So we just always have to be careful when we're doing science in archaeology and trying to figure out what happened and when and how. We're always making assumptions, and it depends on your worldview what assumptions you're going to make, right? So let's talk about that. The dispersion from Babel. You have the Tower of Babel here. Like I was just saying, you have a loss of technology as people groups split apart and leave the Tower of Babel. And you have these family trees. Think of the family trees as as you go down throughout history. Here's a family tree example where you see Asian cultures. We all we know that they're to some degree related in some ways, and that European cultures, African cultures, they're all we can tell which family group, and especially with the genetics, DNA testing and things, we can see when did this group split off from that group, and so we know we're charting back in time, and there are actually cultures who are charting their lineage back to, well, here's an example. Up here you have Adam and Eve. These are all the people in the Bible, the lineages from Adam and Eve down to Moses down here, and some of the families around that time period. All these, here's Noah. So Adam and Eve, Noah, Shem, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. And but you have cultures that it looks like they can track their lineage all the way back to the 3 sons of Noah, or Noah himself, right? So based on it, it looks like the similarities are matching up with biblical names that are recorded. And we see genetic testing, like I was just talking about, where we can trace all these people groups back, and they call it out of Africa, and I think that's assumption laden. It's based on assumptions that we evolved first in Africa, and I think that's because of the DNA and the artifacts and things that they find in Africa and then in other places. And I think it's, they all came from the same place. I would say probably more so like Ararat or something like that, and then, or the Tower of Babel, and then they've all split from there. But we see that example, and I think it does fit, and in fact we see from biology that it very likely fits into 6,000 years based on the mutation rates being as they are today. It actually probably does fit better with 6,000 years than it does 200,000 years or something like that. Another interesting thing with the people groups and their languages is that today we have all kinds of different languages, and some of them are similar, very similar to each other. You have different language families, and they can trace it back to 1, 2, 3, 4, I think it's 20 different language families that all of a sudden seem to just be in existence, a few thousand years ago. Here's another picture of this map as they're somewhat interrelated, interconnected, these languages influencing and changing each other over time, little by little, but you get back to the beginning and they say secular linguists are puzzled by the existence of 20 or so language families in the world today. This is a problem for secular linguists. How did the language families come into existence? Only Genesis provides a credible explanation. All of a sudden we see 20 languages coming out, and we don't know how they evolved or what, who started speaking these languages, and they all kind of seem to appear at the same time period. That seems like it's best explained by Genesis, doesn't it? By the Tower of Babel. So you have the people forced to leave the Tower of Babel. God spread them out, as we read just this evening here. And as we follow through history, this would be at the beginning, or the Tower of Babel could have been during the time of the Ice Age. And you think of the Ice Age, you think of the time of the flood, where the continents are moving across the earth, we think. And all kinds of volcanoes and stuff going off during this worldwide flood. You're going to have hot water oceans, which are going to evaporate much faster than the oceans today, right? So you're going to have a lot of water up in the atmosphere, and as it comes down, it's going to precipitate, rain, ice, snow in the winter especially, or at higher elevations. You're going to build up a lot of layers of precipitation of water, of ice, of snow up there, more than can melt during each summer, and so you're building these glaciers and these ice layers up over time. So we've got the Ice Age, and in fact, this is a better explanation of the Ice Age. Our explanation is much better than the secular explanation of the Ice Age, of each Ice Age. They say it's probably related to sun cycles, or the Milankovitch cycles, I think they call it, and other things where, the sun changed, or the earth and the moon, changed their distance in relation to each other. And but there's they can't explain it as well as we can to really build up these glaciers. But imagine, so the point of this is you have water coming out of the ocean onto land, so the ocean level drops, and so now you have exposed areas like between Russia here, Asia, towards North America. So you have exposed land where people could walk straight over, straight across from one continent to the next. You have same thing with Southeast Asia right there, and Australia. You would have a whole land bridge where kangaroos could have actually hopped to Australia from Ararat at this point in time. But notice too, during these times and currently today, we like to live where it's nice and warm and tropical living, easy, catching fish and everything else. We like to live on the coast a lot of times. I don't know, maybe you're like me, you like to live in mountain areas, right? But there probably would have been a lot of sites around here by the coast during the Ice Age times that would have then, when the water rises, get flooded, right? And I wonder, this is again speculation, and this is again where we need to be careful, I wonder if that's what's behind the legend of Atlantis. Just speculation, I can't prove that. But an ancient civilization that was intelligent that got destroyed by water, that could have been, actually, that sounds like before the flood even too. Again, I'm not proving any of that, I'm not trying to here. But we do see places around the world underwater. This is an interesting example. I don't know if this is man-made. It might be natural. This is called the Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan. It's very step-like, very flat surfaces and angular rock formations. And rock does oftentimes break in right angles, so it could be natural, although it could be man-made too. And the point of this being, I'm not sure what it is exactly. But I watched a documentary, and again, I saw two experts who have been to this site, and they studied this. They looked at the same information, and they came out to different conclusions. So again, that's what we're seeing is the same evidence. You know, one guy says, oh, it's man-made, and the other guy says, I think it's probably natural. And there's all kinds of different things about the Yonaguni block there. Some people say this is maybe a face. You can see the eyes right here. I don't know. Again, this is speculation. This is I want us to be skeptical of these things still, nonetheless. But if our theories are true, if our worldview is true that the world was flooded and there was this ice age only 4,000 years ago, we would expect to see more things under the ocean. But I don't think many people are looking because they don't expect there to be things like this. People advanced enough to be building civilizations during the time of the Ice Age in these places, according to their worldviews, right? They think the Ice Age was a little further back. They don't expect to find these civilizations. Another example, here's the face again right there, potential face. The Bimini Road in the Caribbean, again, I don't know, and you'll see some of these things on, like I said, on the History Channel, and they say, oh, it's so unique, it's so intelligently designed, it must have been aliens that helped us. Must have been, of course. I don't know, again, we want to be careful in this, but even at that, I don't know if I would count out the potential of demonic activity in helping to create these things. Again, that's kind of very much speculation for sure, but there's legends and myths that are kind of interesting about that. But we want to be careful nonetheless, for sure. Here's Dwarka, India. These could be man-made block stones. Again, people aren't really looking for these things because they don't expect them to be down in the ocean. So I wonder, there could be a lot of good research opportunities here in the future. Pavlopetri, Greece. There could be underwater ruins that seem like they would match what was found on land of about 4,000 years ago. It seemed like they matched the same type of constructions and things. Another one there in India. This is an interesting one. This is a series of caves dug into the rock in Turkey, the Derinkuyu Caves. Here's pictures of it. So you can go there and explore them today. And interesting history with these is I think there was Christians that escaped persecutions in early church history in these caves. But they're even older than that they were dug out, that they were created. I'm not sure. I don't know if they exactly know when they were created. But I think there's myths about these caves where they say people were escaping evil or dark winters. Which I wonder, were they escaping the Ice Age temperature changes, climate changes at that point in time? Here's some other pictures of that. This is an interesting site, and again, I'm kind of just throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you tonight. This is an interesting site in Alaska, Ipeatak, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right exactly, but where they dig their homes into the ground right here, and you see whale bones used to support the entrance of it, and it actually looks something like this, where they have it dug down. And they have, a couple of universities go up there every summer and are doing research there to understand this culture. What was this culture? How many people were there? How many sites were there? You see all these dots. Those are all different houses. And what they find today is the ground is permafrost. It's frozen. So it takes a tremendous amount of energy to pick out a house like this in frozen ground. And so the researchers were saying, it's mysterious to us. We're not sure how they created all these houses, all those houses right there, because how did they dig them out in frozen ground? But if this is during the Ice Age, maybe before the ground froze over, then maybe they could have dug it out of unfrozen ground. And so again, our worldview perspective could be very different in this, depending on how long ago did these people live there and that sort of thing. To move on, we see a whole bunch of different things, and we're going to show a few of these things that I think they're all similarities that cultures share all over the world. They share these different things in common that I think all relate back to a common heritage, a common memory of a common place and a common, like example, we see pyramids in Egypt, of course, right? Beautiful pyramids. Many of them, were used in religious ceremonies and things like that. So there's a religious nature to these great pyramids, and even astronomically aligned as well. And so there's a worship of the stars, a worship of deities and creatures other than God. And we see this all over. Here's another one in Egypt. Here's one in Mexico. We see a bunch of these in Mexico, right? And in Central and South America. Here's one in Iraq. It's a ziggurat, but it's very similar still. And Indonesia. Here's another one at Mexico. And again, they're so often tied with astronomy, tied with worship of the heavens, tied with religious ceremonies. I think people are remembering the same event that they came from, that they left, and maybe trying to reproduce it in other places is what I think they're doing. And we see this all over the place. Here's another picture of that one. Another one in Egypt. And it's interesting. These were not just, small groups of people traveling around. And obviously, it takes a lot of work to build these pyramids. And they say even that the earlier pyramids look like they're more advanced than the later pyramids, which I think makes sense because we know Egypt all of a sudden declined really rapidly in wealth and in riches and in power and world dominance, right? It declined very quickly, which I think actually fits very well with the Exodus account, right? We know they declined very rapidly in their prestige and their power and their influence and their wealth and all that, and their slave labor that they all of a sudden didn't have anymore. We see too, if you were to actually, in some of these places, especially Central South America, if you cleared the jungle around these places, you'd find way more things. At least that's what many of the researchers are saying, is that we would just keep finding these cities. These are big cities, complex trade routes. I mean, people were sophisticated and intelligent, and they knew about each other, and they were moving, and I think there was more world travel going on 3,000–4,000 years ago than we give them credit for. Before Christopher Columbus, before the Vikings, I think there might have been ocean travel even before that. I think we have evidence for that. I'll show you an example in a minute. But look at the architecture with all these things, and of course you've seen the pyramids too already on the screen, and that they're built very, very precisely and just incredibly well built, that they've lasted so long. Here's another example here. So many different examples of pyramids. Who's that guy? What's going on? That was a tour that we did, a cruise that we did to Central America, where we looked at some of those sites as well for part of this project. A neat opportunity. But Egypt, here's a couple other ones again, some of them not as well built. Here's one in China, and there's been places where some people have looked at mountains. I think there was an example in Europe somewhere, I can't remember exactly where it was, where they were looking at this mountain, and they were like, I think this might be a man-made mountain and not just natural. But of course, too, we see in America, these mound building cultures, they were building mounds everywhere. Here's these different cultures, people groups, Native American tribes and things that were building mounds all over the place. And as we were settling further and further west, we were using these mounds as fill dirt for whatever projects we were doing all over the place. And so there's not a whole lot of these mounds left anymore, but they were all over the place. And these people groups were connected, like you see here in this picture, these trade routes. They were trading with each other. I think in Mesa Verde and in the Grand Canyon, you had people groups, these Native Americans, that they had parrot feathers from South America, Central and South America. They were trading in seashells from the ocean. These were advanced people groups connected with technology and everything else, I think. Here's again another example of some of these mounds in Cahokia. I already showed you a picture earlier. There's that picture, Cahokia Mounds. This is an interesting one in Ohio. It's called Serpent Mound, and that's what it looks like, just with the grass and the trees and everything there. If we were to draw it, that's what it looks like. And it's interesting. Again, this is kind of speculation. And it's very mysterious. We don't exactly know why the people built this and who these people were that even built this. But notice this verse. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. This is God talking to the serpent, and the seed is often represented as an egg. The seed being the seed of the woman, the one born of the woman, that's Jesus, right? But so all over the place we see serpent worship. Worship of the stars, worship of serpents, instead of worshiping the creatures, or the creatures in the creation rather than the creator, right? And I don't know, are these people trying to combat, or is this Satan having a good time with, I'm going to get the seed this time. But we see, even today, we're still building these pyramids up to the sky, even today. But we see other things, similarities that are all over the place, that these people, these big dolmens that are just big collections of these huge rocks all stacked together, which takes some advanced technology and thinking to be able to move these such huge stones and put them around together. And they were used in maybe religious ceremonies and things, these dolmens, but we find them all over, especially in Europe, but other places too. Here's one in Spain. These dolmens and henges all over the place. I think people are bringing kind of a common memory of these religious ceremonies. And again, Stonehenge is astronomically aligned, worship of the stars. Here's another one in England, Martinhenge and Douthhenge. Here's a Stonehenge in Egypt. And we see, I already had a picture of the Cahokia Mounds again. Notice the wood henge right there at the Cahokia Mounds. We had henges all over the place. I think people got this from one place and it's spread to all over the world. I think people were still remembering these things from the Tower of Babel, I think. And people, I think they were more advanced than we give them credit for. Look at the wall behind this lady and the shapes of the rocks in here. They're puzzle shaped. They either carved them or poured them together. We don't make walls like this today, typically. But we see these all over the place, and they're very well built. In fact, we build our modern structures on top of these walls that are still standing over hundreds and thousands of years, potentially. Their walls are still standing very well, and ours are kind of still crumbling on top of them. People were very smart back then. They moved a tremendous amount of stone at Machu Picchu to build Machu Picchu. Here's Cusco. Notice the different levels and the size of the people compared to these rocks here. And you see, sorry, go back to that one for that. You see very straight cuts and flat surfaces, good knife edge in between these layers. And again, the puzzle shapes in some of these as well still. Here's that picture. Notice the size of some of these stones. These people at least had to be fairly intelligent and advanced to be able to move such big stones and get them fit into place so well. Look at those, some of those puzzle shapes there too. Pretty incredible. This is fascinating, that Puma Punku. And many of these are just scattered just like they were destroyed or something. But you see some of them have, sorry, going back, some of them have very good drill marks going straight into them and very chiseled very nicely. In fact, these are like Lego blocks that would kind of fit and stack together. These people were intelligent back then, not just dumb cavemen. In fact, they would actually take and melt down metal, I think, in this case bronze, I think, and they would melt the bronze down, pour it into these carvings here, into these eye-shaped carvings, and that's keeping two blocks together then from splitting and breaking apart over time. But notice the flat, sharp edges of these rocks. Notice the size of these rocks. And this one they had abandoned at this quarry, but this rock here, the stone of the pregnant woman, in, I believe Lebanon, I think, if I remember right there. And here's another one. These are in Lebanon at least. Look at these huge stones right here, used to build this temple, the Trilithon at Vail. Sorry, there's the Trilithon, the three huge stones, very well built. And so they were fairly advanced, more than we give them credit for. And look at these huge columns. And you see the terracing here along the hillsides. They were smart, and they knew how to terrace the land and use the land for farming and for water control. You have places where you have fountains that go all throughout these areas, and advanced even sewer systems in places. Here's one in Pakistan, an advanced sewer system where these weren't just people slowly evolving, I think. But you have these technologies all over the place, similarities all over the place. But I think they all have a common connection. In fact, this is an interesting one. These are reed boats found at Lake Titicaca in Peru, that's South America. Here's a large one that they built, and I think we have good evidence, potentially, that they did actually take these out on the ocean, and they were traveling the ocean over to the Asian islands and places like that. It looks like there's some good similarities there that we can say, yeah, people were traveling, even though this is long distances of ocean travel. I think people were intelligent and able to do that. But notice, these are the same type of boats here in Egypt. I believe the people in Peru, they have legends of people coming and showing them how to build boats and things like that. I think there was more worldwide travel, more sophistication or advancement back in the past than we give them credit for. And it's different than it is today, right? But here's a map, the Puri-Reis map of 1513. So that's just after Christopher Columbus discovered America, right? But it actually has coastlines of South America here and I believe Antarctica down there as well. Here's another one that has, here's Africa, Asia, you have, I believe North and South America would be somewhat represented here, maybe. At least this looks like that's South America. But you have Antarctica represented on this map, and it might not be exactly accurate, but 1531, they had a map of what looks like Antarctica. And Antarctica wasn't discovered till the 1800s. I can't remember exact date, but I think it was the middle of the 1800s, beginning to middle of the 1800s was when we first looked and found the Antarctica all the way down there. So people, I think they knew more than we give them credit for back in the past. But here, I think what's fascinating is a lot of the researchers look at it and they say, civilizations seem to pop out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, like, it's not like a slow evolution. We can't exactly see that, but it seems like, this author says, the civilizations of ancient Egypt, like that of the Olmecs, emerged all at once and fully formed. They just kind of pop out of nowhere. Oh, we have these cultures, these people groups, like they came from one place and spread, and at the same time we're popping up in different places. We have creation myths that are very similar all throughout the world, and especially flood myths that are very similar all throughout the world. People are remembering the same event, I think, common memory of the same thing, and the same with the Tower of Babel. We have people saying, oh yeah, we went and we built this big tower, and then we got confused, and so we left. And sometimes, there's these myths, oftentimes in other cultures, are very distorted, but we still see similarities to the biblical record, the biblical accounts, which I think that means that shows that our record is probably better. It is better. We can see a lot more detail in it, especially when you look at like Noah's account of the flood. He actually gave, the waters rose for 150 days, and then they took 150 days to go down, and they record those sort of things. So you record all the people's names and how long they lived and when they died, right? So I think we've got a pretty good record to stand on, as opposed to these other myths that are distorted, but I think they're remembering the same thing. In fact, here's a quote here. All over the world, we find cultural legends and myths that closely resemble certain accounts in Scripture, such as the creation, the fall, the flood, and the Tower of Babel accounts. Again, here it says, such striking similarities between creation stories from numerous cultures worldwide and the Genesis account have been hard to explain for evolutionists. Hard to explain. And here again is that picture showing the flood traditions of all these different cultures. These are different cultures, people groups. And the more green there means that the more it fits with the biblical record, the more similarities it has with the Bible. So there's a lot of green there, a lot of similarities. I remember, I think, the same things. And all over the place we have similar beliefs in snake worship and star worship and things like that. In fact, the constellations all have, we basically have the same constellations all over the world. Every culture basically has the same constellations. And some people even pin that back to potentially Seth naming the constellations, and actually some people say the Gospels in the stars. That gets a little bit into speculation, I'm not sure exactly, but you have the virgin with the seed, and you have the serpent and the lion at the end, and things like that. So it might be distorted today, but could it have been based on biblical truths that people knew of? And you think of, I think one of the biggest things we don't really grasp, we don't really understand in our culture, because we're so far removed from even the time of Jesus, 2,000 years. We're so far removed from that some people question, did Jesus even live? I think we have good evidence to say he did, yes. But, the people back then, they all knew, oh yeah, everybody talks about this Jesus guy, But even further back, when let's say that after the flood, 300 years, 400 years after the flood, or after the Tower of Babel, and it's like, well, yeah, of course we all came from the Tower of Babel. Yeah, of course, we all know that. You know, or yeah, of course, yeah. My great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather was Noah. Yeah, so was yours. You know, they all knew that at that point in time. And even you think of pre-flood, before the flood, and creation way back here. You know, for 900 years, you could go back to Adam and Eve and say, hey, you know, tell me about what was it like to be in the garden, to walk with God. And here's another hypothetical, another conjecture. Did Adam and Eve have belly buttons? Because they weren't born of a woman, so they didn't need an umbilical cord. So did they have belly buttons? You know, could the kids have actually gone back to Adam and Eve and asked, hey, can I see your belly without belly buttons? I don't know. They might have been. I don't know. But, you know, before, you know, the garden was still there. It was being guarded by the angel, right, with the flaming sword. I think they could have gone back to that garden and at least, you know, looked from a distance, you know, or I don't know if they could have talked to the angel there or what, I don't know. But people, I think all throughout history, for that 1,700 years, for hundreds of years after the flood and after the Tower of Babel, they all knew they should be doing God's will, they should be following God, the Creator God, right? They all knew that. But they didn't, I don't think they were trusted. I think they wanted to do their own way. You know, we think of the Philistines and these other cultures, the Ammonites and all those, right? Or the Amorites. You know, they turned away and, you know, did Sodom and Gomorrah really deserve that much punishment? And it's like, well, no, I think they all probably knew they should be following the same God. And I think that's still true today, even though we're further removed, it seems, from the time of Jesus and beyond. But we have God's Word that we can read and know these things, and I think good evidence that is reliable. So with all of this, the key points here again were ancient man, I think, was very intelligent all throughout. Ancient man dispersed from Babel, and the Bible is true here. So with this too, we want to keep thinking. Be prepared to think, be prepared to study these things, because again, there's a lot of conjecture, there's a lot of mystery and intrigue and aliens and stuff that go into this topic. We need to be careful with this. But I think what we can hold to, what we do know to be true, I think the Bible, there's good evidence for it. I think it's true. I think we do know that. And I think the Bible says even, all are without excuse. We all know there is a God, you know, and that as Romans 1 puts it in there, that from the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his divine nature, have been clearly seen so that we were without excuse. We know there's a God, even if some might say they're atheists. I think it's true. The Bible explains the history of mankind. How Adam and Eve were created perfect in the garden. But they sinned, just like we sinned. Unfortunately, we probably all would have at some point. I want to try that. I don't care what God says. I want to try that. You know, that sort of thing. The world, because of that sin, we know the world groaneth and travaileth because of sin. It's not the way it should have been. I think, I love this idea. I think it's true that our bodies, biologically, they're reproducing themselves over and over again. Your cells duplicate, and your body is replicating itself over and over again to where your skin, after 3 weeks, you have a whole new set of skin because the old stuff has scratched off and now becomes the dust that we breathe, right? That's where your skin goes. Every 3 weeks, it's a whole new layer of skin. Your bones take 10 years to like regrow or become recycled over again. I think we were made to live forever. We see back before the flood, they were living hundreds of years. Now something changed. The environment changed drastically with the flood. I think that's a big part of it. But I think if Adam and Eve had never sinned, and their kids had never sinned, and their kids had never sinned, and their kids had never sinned, I think we'd still be living in the Garden of Eden today. How cool would that be? Walk with God. Unfortunately, that's not the way it was, and God knew that, and made a way for us, right? He made a way. They sinned, we sinned. We cannot solve the problem of sin by ourselves, can we? We can never be good enough. We can never be good enough. And we know Jesus Christ is the only answer. And so, if we put our faith, put our trust in Him, we can be saved and live forever with God. Amen. That's the hope that we have. I totally forgot. I'm supposed to share about our ministry a little bit more, and I totally ran past that and totally forgot about it. I can just take a couple minutes and share. I won't be long. I know it's been probably long enough already. But our brother here asked me to share a little bit about our ministry that we're doing right now. We're working with Alpha Omega Institute, and actually the last 2 years I've devoted myself more so to college ministry in our hometown there of Grand Junction, Colorado. That's Colorado Mesa University. And what's cool has been we've been developing a college ministry there. We've got a few student leaders who have at least signed their names to say, yeah, let's do a club here on campus. They haven't been super involved, but we're building, we're growing, we're getting experience talking with students, and it's been exciting. The goal that people can have hope. Suicide and depression have been big problems, especially in the Grand Junction area. I don't know about this area over here as well, but I can't imagine what it's like to live without this hope that we are defiled and need saving, and we can't do it ourselves. That's where Jesus comes in and can pay the penalty for our sins. And what's cool is what I've been doing is taking about a 10-question survey out on campus, and I just start talking to students. Hey, I've got these questions. Do you mind answering these questions for us? And asking them, do you believe in a God or a higher power? And why? Why or why not? Or what happens when you die? Or what's the meaning and purpose to life? And again, we're still building momentum. We're still growing. It's challenging because we're just sowing seed, and we're not sure, what's happening to it exactly. We haven't seen just this revival yet. But what I'm finding is that people don't know how to think anymore. We're kind of trained in this, in the mindsets of what we're trained in school, and study for the test, cram for the test, and put the answers down, and then, live however we want to, right? But people don't think about these bigger questions. And one time I asked this, a number of times I've asked this question, but, is there meaning and purpose to life? And one young lady told me, yes, I want to think, I don't know what it is, but I want to think that there is a meaning and purpose to life. And so right there I was able to say, hey, can I share with you what I think is the meaning and purpose to life? And I was able to share the gospel with her right then and there. So it's things like that where even just getting people to think, like I said, they don't know how to think anymore, and getting people to think is just a big part of the challenge in this day and age, and I think it's going to take time to see results coming from these conversations. But I think we have good, real answers, good, real evidence for believing in the Bible, for believing in God, for believing in Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit too. We have good reason for that, and I don't know, it's exciting. So let me leave you with this verse. But in your hearts, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. So first thing here, I should maybe have highlighted, bolded this part too. We want to set apart Christ as Lord, personally, in our hearts, and for our families. And to be prepared with these answers to people, and to be willing to dig deeper with people and do our homework and get into these things with people and say, yes, we've got good evidence for our faith, for the Bible, for God. And do that with gentleness and respect, with love, right? So let me pray for us to finish up here. Thank you, God, for this day. Thank you for this time now to be able to come together tonight and hear about what you've done throughout history, to know that these people all throughout history have known you, whether they've rejected you, known you and rejected you, or turned to you. And we just pray that you would be working still in hearts and minds today, in our hearts and minds. If anybody's here that doesn't know you, Lord, be working in their heart and mind to draw them to yourself. As we are so thankful for the hope that we have, that it's not just in this life, it's not just in the material things and our own desires, our own wants being fulfilled, but it's your will be done. Help us to be able to honestly pray that your will be done and not our will. And we just thank you for this time to consider what you've done in this world and in our lives. And we praise you, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. Rob? Do you have questions? Was that the next thing?
Yeah, that'll be nice. Yeah, so can you turn this microphone on, please? Check, 1, 2. There's a little red light on this. Does that mean it's off?
It's on now.
Check, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that sounds good. All right, so if anybody has any questions, feel free to come up and ask. And I think I'm going to do it a little different. We usually have you come up and ask the question at the microphone. I think what we'll do is just raise your hand. Brian will point to the person he thinks he wants to answer the question from, and I'll take the mic to you.
Not that side of the room. I'm just kidding.
So, any questions?
Have you ever considered the possibility of there being some truth to what the evolutionists say, of there being a larger amount of oxygen and more vegetation pre-flood? And that could be part of what made everyone live so long?
We couldn't hear the question.
Oh, so your question, you said evolutionists believe that, or creationists
Well,
believe that?
some truth to what the evolutionists say about there being more oxygen in the atmosphere, as in that being pre-flood, and that's why everyone was living so long. And when the water came up, it took out all of the vegetation and absorbed the oxygen.
Yeah. Good question. So evolutionists don't believe in the flood. They believe in the long ages of slow and gradual buildup of the layers. So I think what you were saying, that evolutionists say that about the flood. They don't believe in that part. I would agree with what you were saying about, there's more, there probably was a better oxygen environment. And actually, if you think about it, and I haven't done the research on it, there's so many things that need more research on our side of the fence here, that I think are actions that are not considered. Before the flood, currently, today, our fertilizers are made up of what? Nitrogen and potassium is a big part of it, right?
Yep.
Yes.
And phosphorus. Which nitrogen, there's 70% I think of the air that we breathe is nitrogen. In the ground we dig out the phosphorus and we dig out the potassium in salts and things like that. And so that's in the rock layers that have been laid down, sedimentary layers. And so I think this is conjecture again, this is a hypothesis, is that before the flood, probably the soils and everything were much better, and we know genetically foods are getting worse, or everything is getting worse. Our bodies are getting worse genetically, right? We're getting more mutated. But foods were much better in the past than they are today, especially with all the tinkering we've done in the past 50, 70 years, whatever. Potentially, I don't know what your idea is on genetically modified foods. I don't know, is it good or bad? we don't know what we're messing with completely, is maybe part of the thing we have to consider. But just in general, it's getting more and more mutated, so maybe these things were better in the past. The soils were maybe better in the past, and then as things got shook up and spread out and laid back down into these layers, now maybe these soils, maybe these things that are plant-bearing are not as good anymore because it's mixed up in a different environment. And so I think a big part of the beginning was probably the atmospheric conditions were better. The pressure could have even been higher air pressure at that point in time. There's the idea of the canopy theory. Again, I'm not sure what to believe about the canopy theory. Was there canopy? How thick or how thin? How did that affect the environment or the atmosphere? But I think definitely we see things were bigger in the past. With fossils, we see things were much bigger in the past, and so we can be sure of things were very much better in the past than they are today. And so, yeah, you had a lot of changes with the flood. And yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a question, but I also wanted to chime in on that. I'm thinking, it seemed to have something to do with, if they're born after the flood, because I remember, like, Noah himself lived 350 years after the flood, where a lot of people were living and dying during that time, and I think Seth was still alive at the time of Abraham, or not Seth, Shem, sorry, was alive still at the time of Abraham. So I'm not sure, about environment, food, and all that. It seems like there was something with the, genetics and being born after the flood or something. I'm not sure. But anyway, my question was, years ago, I read a book called The Puzzle of Ancient Man. I think it was by this Don Landis.
Puzzle of Ancient Man, I think Don Chittick.
Oh, Chittick, okay. Chittick, okay.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so these aren't related at all.
It's along the same lines.
It's along the same lines.
Yeah.
I remember being fascinated and blown
Yeah.
away by all the stuff that they found
Yeah.
about the ancients. But this would have probably even a growth upon that of the information.
Yeah, and we do have that book actually on the book table back there too, as well. So yeah.
Okay, sweet.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Other questions? How about in the back there? You want to shout it out? I can repeat your
Sure.
question.
Have you done any research on Gavin Mindy's work with China?
So Gavin Mendes, he's a researcher that's done a lot of research in China with their treasure fleets and how they pretty much sailed the globe in the 1400s. I wasn't sure if you've been aware of some of that research.
I am not familiar with that.
All right, I'll send you some links and stuff.
Okay. Cool.
So basically, real quick, so his research shows that the Chinese sent out a treasure fleet basically to pronounce the new emperor's arrival in China on the scene. And so they might have even traveled to Italy, to Australia, and to many other places. And so, so kind of looking that the ancients were global water travelers, including China, which is very fascinating. So just another cool puzzle of an ancient man.
Yeah.
So,
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
There's a lot of mysterious things we don't know exactly. We're trying to figure out. There's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and their treasure ships were almost the size of Noah's Ark. A little bit smaller, but massive wooden ships too. So there's some really cool research in that.
Wow.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very cool. Question.
I was wondering chronologically where the Ice Age fits in from the Tower of Babel to Peleg when the Earth was divided.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you say that comes?
Right. I can't remember exactly when Peleg was supposed to have lived as far as how
I think
many.
it was about 6 generations after Noah.
Something like that, yeah.
So I was wondering do you think the Ice Age came in between that or after?
Well, the Ice Age
after Peleg?
is supposed to have been the 700 years after the flood. It's like 500 years that the ice was building, and then this is according, I think, to Michael Ward's models, that the ice was building, and Larry Bartleman, I think, had done research on that too, and then 200 years that it had melted down after its maximum height. And so Peleg, I think some people reference Peleg as being when the Tower of Babel when people left the Tower of Babel. Is anybody familiar with that? I kind of forget the details exactly on that.
It just says that the time of Peleg was when the earth was divided.
So you're wondering maybe the water rose to cover the land bridges, and so maybe it was in that sense divided. I'm not sure. Were you going to add to that?
Oh, yeah, in the biblical genealogies, it could be that Peleg, being the brother of Joktan, and also Jobab, is mentioned, and some people believe that Jobab is another name for Job. And so he could be tied in somewhat at the time of Job, and a lot of the catastrophes that happen are because of post-Ice Age stuff as well. But yeah, so one of the theories of the Earth being divided is the continents are settling in, the Ice Age is melting, essentially raising water levels, and so the people that have spread out are being separated because of the rising oceans. So the Earth is being divided, but I guess others say it could be the plate tectonics and other stuff. So we're still figuring that one out.
Thank you.
Brian.
I'll wait for the microphone. So I guess this isn't so much a question about the genius of ancient man, it's more the question of the genius of ancient Noah. What is your take on the recent reports that they have found Noah's Ark?
How recent is that?
I'm not sure, but like it's just been like a circulating thing that I've like started hearing. It's like, oh, they found Noah's Ark, and I'm like, I don't know if that's true or not. So
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they find it, because I think it's a real thing. I think Noah's Ark is real, obviously, yes. And so it's possible to be found if it hasn't been destroyed yet. I think, there's theories, or I think it's reasonable that people maybe used some of the materials, the wood and the things from Noah's Ark to take with them afterwards and build other structures. And so I wonder if it got broken down shortly after the flood. There's people that claim that, these structures, wood structures on some of these mountains might be from that sort of thing. I know John Morris, I think, had done expeditions to go find Noah's Ark, and some other men. So it's possible it's out there. It might be found, but I don't know if it will, because even if we do find Noah's Ark, I think people would still maybe try to hide it, or still believe it's faked, or believe that it's, I don't know. I don't know about Noah's Ark.
like, I mean, obviously I believe it's a real thing, but I don't know how credible, like, the reports, oh, they found Noah's Ark on this blah, blah, blah mountain, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of claims, and it's been found in many different places, and so, be skeptical.
Right, yeah.
Probably first, and let's look at the evidence and see what's realistic, what's reasonable. I think that's important in this day and age of the internet and all the information available to us, where I can say one thing and somebody says another thing and somebody says another thing, and you don't know what's true and what's not true, and you have to do a lot of digging, a lot of research, and we live in a day and age where we have to be very discerning and skeptical of anything, really. but keep trusting God that truth will be known.
All right, let's take a couple more questions and then break up for refreshments.
Really important.
I was wondering if you come across the interesting information about the elongated skulls that are associated with these ruins in Peru. I thought it was a hoax at first. I was finding it on the internet, but apparently it's really true. There are not very many people investigating it. But every place you find these really high technology, it's Egypt, and it's pre-Incan. It's pre-Incan, and and there's all kinds of myths that these are European. So somebody, the big name archaeologists aren't interested. They don't know what to make of it. But there's one particular individual who's just paying for this. He had DNA tested. He took a sample of these skulls, and it's European haplotypes right there in ancient Peru. Apparently it's legit. Just wondering if you don't run across that.
So it matches with European people.
It's
DNA.
there's actual European DNA, and the myths, the legends. People are always saying that that can't be true, but then he actually had it tested, and the skulls, they have like red hair. You can still see the red. They're like a couple thousand years old. They just look more mummified.
Wow.
But he had the DNA tested, and it was European.
Yeah. Well, I know, so you're talking about the elongated skulls, and I know there are some cultures, I think there might even be a culture living today that kind of binds the head of infants. So it's something different than the manipulating of the skulls at birth to create elongated skulls. Yeah. I think there's a lot of examples, and again, I haven't done the research in a while, so I don't remember, and I haven't done the full research on it, but I think there's a lot of commonalities, similarities between one people group here and a people group over here across the world, where you're like, how is that group? Even I was actually talking to a young lady who's Eskimo, of Eskimo heritage from Alaska, and she was talking about how many people mistake her for, Asian, Korean, or Chinese, and there's so many similarities. In fact, everybody I think she said she's had friends take the DNA test, and they had, the DNA is very similar to the Asian cultures down there, but it's Eskimo. But it's also Indian, Native American cultures, I should say, have a lot of similarities there. And I'd be curious to get a full research, out on that as far as these people groups are all connected more than we think they are, and in different ways than we would expect if evolution is true. The predictions I don't think would carry through, but I think it fits with people spreading out from these people groups. So I'd be curious to kind of figure out how all that DNA testing and heritage of families work. So I don't know if we have any experts on that in here that can enlighten us in the future.
Let's take one more question.
One more question right here.
I was just wondering, when you were helping with the research on that book, what specific...
Oh, I wonder what specific areas of research that you did for that book.
I was kind of all over the board with researching this stuff, and so I researched, a lot of these issues on the similarities between cultures, and just got, I was kind of just finding quotes here and there and everywhere and putting them into a readable format, and then we had an editor who really did a lot of the editing down of my stuff and other people's things as well. So, it was just, we weren't exactly sure of the outline of the book when we first started, and so that's when I was really most involved. And so I was pulling in data and information from all kinds of sides of things to put together for this book. So it was definitely a good collaboration from all of us there. To try to put it together, and I kind of left in my research when I left the Bible college and moved on, and they did a great job finishing it up and getting it really polished. So good experience. It was neat to. Did a lot of reading. I always consider myself a math, science guy. That's my interest. And so to throw me into a project, history and writing and reading, I was kind of, okay, God, why am I here doing this? And that was actually the year I met my wife at the Bible college. So God knew I was supposed to be there for a second year at that Bible college. So it's pretty neat the way it worked out. So praise God.
All right, I know we have a lot more interesting things to say, but it's getting late, so if you have any more questions for Brian, you can come up and ask him one-on-one, and then I just want to let you know he brought a whole bunch of books out, which I'm sure there's a lot of very interesting material there, so please avail yourself of his book table, which is back there near where the refreshments are, out this door, across the foyer and into the other room. And otherwise, have some refreshments. We neglected to bring drinks this time, so I think we're restricted to water or coffee. So anyway, sorry about that. So anyway, if you could plan to start leaving the building by 9:15. We're supposed to be completely out of here by 9:30, so it would be great if you could do that. And otherwise, we'd have a final prayer, but Brian already gave us a splendid prayer, so we don't need to do that. So thank you all very much for coming, and let's have one more round of applause for Brian.